Bienvenue and welcome to the Education USA pre-departure orientation for Canadian students and students living in Canada. I'm your Education USA Eastern Advisor, Jenica Heim. For those who have worked with Education USA, I'm so proud of all the hard work and efforts that you have made to get to this point. And thank you so much for coming today. For those who are unfamiliar with Education USA and our program, here's a little information you can pass along to your friends and your younger siblings. Education USA is a U.S. State Department network of more than 400 international student advising centers in 180 countries. The network promotes U.S. higher education to students around the world by offering accurate, comprehensive, and current information about opportunities to study at accredited post-secondary institutions in the United States. You can learn more about the network at educationusa.state.gov. In Canada, we currently have 2 Education USA advisors. Besides myself, we have Rachel Liu, who's with us right now. She's the Western advisor in Vancouver, and she will be in the chat supporting you with questions, and she will also provide some tips later on in the session. We at Education USA would like to congratulate you on your decision to study in the United States. Today's webinar is not only a presentation with some pretty important tips, but also a capstone and a celebration of your accomplishments and the next steps on your academic journey. I'd like to just take a moment to give a special congratulations to our Fulbright Award recipients who are pursuing graduate studies or independent research through their academic exchange between Canada and the US. Congrats to all of you. We are fortunate today to be joined by 2 distinguished guests from the U.S. Embassy. Sarah Shields from U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the U.S. Embassy will be joining us a little later with information about border crossing, including time for your questions. And up first, we're joined by Shannon Hill. Shannon is the Director of Public Engagement at the U.S. Embassy. Shannon is Education USA's main point of contact with the State Department. She's been a great ally for our program, joining us at our annual Education USA Fair, and of course, providing opening remarks today. Thank you, Shannon, for joining us.
All righty. Well, thank you, Jenica. And good evening to everyone. Let me start by saying to all of the students joining us this evening, congratulations on having been accepted, and thank you for having chosen to pursue your studies in the United States. As Jenica mentioned, my name is Shannon Hill, and I'm a U.S. Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State. I'm currently serving as the Director for Public Engagement at the U.S. Embassy Ottawa, sometimes referred to as Cultural Affairs Officer. So in this role, I lead a remarkable team of Americans and Canadians at the Embassy and coordinate with the 7 U.S. consulates across Canada in strengthening people-to-people ties and deepening mutual understanding between Americans and Canadians, including through educational, cultural, and professional exchanges. As I think most of you already know, but I'll mention anyways, Education USA is a U.S. Department of State network of over 430 international student advising centers in more than 175 countries and territories, including in Canada. I imagine the road to where you are now may have been a long one in terms of your academic path. We are really glad that you chose to make Education USA a part of this path towards studying in the United States. Whether you attended an Education USA college fair, consulted with Jenica or Rachel, or simply made use of our Canada-specific website, social media, and handouts. I know that your decision to study or study and play sports in the United States was an important one for both you and your family. But I also know that your decision was made easier and the process was greatly supported by the amazing work of Jenica and Rachel. So I want to say a special thanks to them for organizing today's event and for their tireless efforts, creativity, and dedication to helping Canadian students and families navigate the process of pursuing higher education in the United States. It is truly really exciting to see you all virtually at this stage in your journey, getting ready to head off to college. I'll say in the United States, we typically say college, whether you'll be studying at an institution that actually is called a college or a university. For the graduate students joining us today, I know this is not your first course of study, but as this will be a path of self-discovery, learning, professional development, and personal growth for those heading off to college for the first time, I think it will be a rewarding path for you as well as you choose to complete your graduate education in the United States. To the parents and other loved ones joining tonight, I'd like to say a special thanks and congratulations. I appreciate all that you do to support the student in your life in pursuing their education. In conclusion, we at the Embassy and the entire U.S. mission to Canada look forward to hearing about how your journey progresses. Please do stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. So before we get started, I want to give a couple of notes here. So we have more than 350 students who signed up for today's session, as well as some counselors and university representatives. Because of the number of people here today, I did turn off the public chat, and we have the Q&A chat available. I'm asking, since this pre-departure session is for students and their families, that the counselors and reps please remain in the background and allow the students and parents to ask the questions. The best way to ask those questions will be, like I mentioned, in the Q&A area, and we will, the ones that are more general in nature, we will be sharing potentially in the Q&A section, or you will have them answered privately. We will do our best to get to as many questions as possible. And if your question's not answered during the session, you will likely receive a follow-up email with the answers. Before jumping into the content, let's celebrate who's joining us today. While we can't highlight everyone here, these are 6 faces from this year's cohort. Congrats to BC students Abigail and Risha, who will both be studying in California this fall at California Baptist University and Cal State East Bay. Congrats to all of our student athletes, including golfer Edie, headed out to Manhattan University, and basketball player Joshua, who will be going to St. Ambrose University. And lastly, congratulations to all of our artists. Good luck with your studies in New York, Aurora and Anna, both from Toronto. When it comes to the 300 plus students on today's call, here's some fun statistics. 43% of students are joining us from Ontario, and we have a large Western contingent from BC and Alberta today. What are you studying? Well, almost a quarter of the students here have chosen to study business, with the next top 2 being physical and life sciences and social sciences. And how many athletes do we have on the call today? Almost 1/4, just above 1/4, will be playing a competitive sport. And of no surprise here, many of you are hockey players. All right, thank you so much again to everyone who's joined us. And finally, just a fun little map here. We've got folks going to 35 different states across the US, with the top 3 being California, New York, and Michigan. So let's go ahead and jump into the focus of our call, which is what we call step 5, preparing to depart. First and foremost, if you're on this call today, it's because you're going to be studying in the United States this fall. And you should already be in touch with your International Student Services Office. It sometimes is the ISSO, ISO, ISS, different acronyms, but they're all the exact same thing. So essentially, the ISSO is your main point of contact and what I like to call your new best friend. Your new best friend is your designated school official, or your DSO. Once you are admitted to your university, that is the person who sent you your I-20 if you are going on F or M visa status, or sent you your DS 2019 if you're on J status. So that is really, you can talk to Education USA whenever in the process. However, for very specific university questions, you should always be reaching out at this point to your DSO first. Your DSO can help you with things like verifying your housing, and particularly if you're a grad student who's looking for off-campus housing, they could provide you with some resources on what are legitimate ways to get housing in your new city, and maybe what are some scams or things that you should be familiar with and aware of so you don't end up in one of those pitfalls. They're also the ones who typically lead a university orientation for international students. Oftentimes there might be a virtual session in the summer, as well as an on-campus session when you arrive. Please go to those sessions. It's very important. You are an international student and you need to know all the different pieces of advice and information, and not just advice, but also rules that they'll go over to make sure that you follow everything as you engage in your studies. If you haven't yet, you can go online and pay your CVIS fee, fmjfee.com. If you go to the handout section, which is a little tab next to the chat area, in the handout section, you can find links to a bunch of different things we're talking about today. So you can find the fmjfee.com link if you haven't done that yet. If you have an I-20, you will pay $350 to fill out your CVIS profile. If you have a DS 2019, you'll pay $220. You can do this up until the day before you leave. Once you do this, you can then print out your receipt. I don't recommend waiting that long, but point being, this is a digitally done thing and it should take you no more than about 20 minutes to complete. Lastly, if you haven't yet, make sure your passport is valid. It's very important that you have a non-expired passport when you cross the border. So if you need to, run and get it now and make sure that that is the case. When it comes to visas, just a couple of things to note. We don't have a consular officer joining us today, but the language provided here was provided by a consular officer. And so I'll be reading the bullet points related to visas as they are written. Canadian citizens are exempt from making a visa appointment. So just note that Canadians, please do not apply for a visa appointment. It is not required of you. And especially because it might be challenging to get an appointment, you should definitely not try to do so. Just you only need your I-20 or your DS 2019 and your Canadian passport when you cross the border. Now, for those who do need visas, that would be the Canadian permanent residents and the third-party nationals. So student and exchange visa program applicants may continue their applications. So you may continue to work on your applications and preparing them. The U.S. Mission to Canada consular offices are not currently scheduling new appointments, and no previously scheduled appointments have been canceled. Please continue to monitor for availability of new appointment slots at our 7 consulates across Canada. And then you have the link to do so here on this slide. As I mentioned, that is a link in the handout section. So if you need to make a visa appointment, if you're not a Canadian or American citizen, then you can go there and find that information and begin to complete your paperwork. American citizens, you will cross the border with your American passport. There's nothing else you need to do. There's no other paperwork that needs to be issued to you in order to cross the border. And lastly, if you're an Indigenous student, you can definitely reach out if you want more information about the J Treaty. We also have it available on our Education USA Canada website. Essentially, if you have proof of Indigenous status, then you can cross the border as an American permanent resident. Again, if that's your situation and you want more information, please reach out. Additionally, as you prepare to depart, you need to make sure that you will have health insurance. There are a few different ways you might choose to do that. Many universities have an insurance plan. Oftentimes, that's the best way to go because it will make sure that you have access to the healthcare facilities if there are student healthcare facilities on campus. And it usually simplifies things. It also goes right alongside your tuition, so it's not a separate payment that needs to be made. I do know that sometimes people are cost sensitive to those insurance plans and want to shop around. So some other things you can look at are secondary healthcare providers in Canada that might have a travel insurance plan that fits your need. Canadian private insurance for traveling students exist. And then there's also US private insurance for international students. Just make sure as you're shopping around, there's a number of things that you need to look at. The way insurance works in the US is a bit different. So for example, there are co-pays and deductibles. So make sure you pay attention to the prices on those things as you're comparing different providers for your health needs. And of course, as you plan to depart, you need to pack up and prepare for your departure day. You can enter up to 30 days prior to the start date that's listed on your I-20 or your DS 2019. So you can enter as a student at that time. If you're crossing the border any earlier, so say, for example, you're a grad student who wants to go down and look at housing right now, you would cross the border as a visitor to go potentially apartment hunting. You would need to return back to Canada before you cross again as a student within your 30-day window. If you're driving, you can definitely move household items with you. And as we speak to the border guard, we'll show you some resources to know what sort of things are prohibited from crossing the border with. And of course, review those CBP guidelines to make sure you're not bringing anything illegal over the border. So just as a recap, the important documents that you need, I like to call it your important documents folder. All right, get organized, get that folder together, tuck all these documents in there so that when you cross the border, everything's on your lap, ready to go, or on your lap if you're in the car, in your hand when you're at the airport. So when you're crossing the border, you need to have your passport, your I-20 or DS 2019, the receipt that you paid CVIS, the copy of the proof of funds, and the F1 visa if you are not a Canadian citizen. And of course, if you're an American, it would be just the American passport. Once you arrive, there's some other documents you might need once you get to campus. So I do recommend that you might want copies of important personal documents, such as a birth certificate. You definitely want a copy of your official final transcripts in case there's any issues with those coming from your high school, and your immunization records, depending on the university. Some universities require certain immunizations in order for you to enroll and take classes. So now you've arrived at the border. And with that, we are going to welcome our guest, Sarah Shields from U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the U.S. Embassy, who's now going to take us through what that border procedure looks like. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah.
Happy to. And first, let me congratulate all of you. When I was a student, I studied overseas twice and loved it. You will have an amazing experience. And I have 2 advanced degrees, so I'm a huge proponent of advanced education. So really congratulate you on your accomplishments. So a couple of resources that I'm going to get into. When you go to the cbp.gov website, there's a lot of information there. It's updated. And as you know, things have been evolving rapidly over the last few months. So before you leave, make sure to double check because the status of things may have shifted. So just make sure you keep an eye on any new executive orders. Make sure you're paying attention to the government websites, the official government websites. So on cbp.gov, if you scroll down a bit on this page, this is the top of the page. If you scroll down, there's a section that says locate a port. So if you are driving across, I highly suggest you look up the area that you'll be crossing at. And if you need to call ahead, you have any questions about the documentation you have with you, then go ahead and call and say, I'm a student, I'm coming into the United States to study at this university. Here's the documents that I'm bringing. Is there anything else you recommend that I bring? And to Janica's point, it's wonderful to have electronic copies of everything, but she's absolutely right. You want to have print-off copies. And I moved to Ottawa about 1.5 years ago, and this was my binder when I came across. I had my job offer, I had phone numbers, I had contacts, I had my reservation printed off of where I was staying. So you do want those hard copies with you, and you will want those every single time you cross. So if you're crossing at the land border, this is how you can find out where you're going. Just identify the state that you'll be going to. You can click on the state or do this drop down on the right, this view ports of entry in your state. It will take you to a list. And for example, we'll look at Beecher Falls, Vermont. You would click on that, and it will take you to information about the port. Not every land port is open 24 hours. So it's important to check the hours of operation, but there are important phone numbers there as well. And then there's a website called Border Wait Times. So if you have any concerns about crossing at a busy time, you don't want to be backed up, you can always check that. It's actually an app. So Border Wait Times. Important if you are crossing by land. And if you're crossing by air and you're flying out of one of these airports, we have pre-clearance. So you will actually have a chance to see a Customs and Border Protection officer before you depart Canada. And those locations are Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Halifax. If you are not flying out of one of those airports and you have a layover, I recommend having a longer layover, scheduling a longer layover so that you don't feel rushed, you don't feel stressed if you have any delays with getting through. And it's not an issue of concern if you are sent to secondary, because our mission at Customs and Border Protection is keeping, bad people, bad actors, and illicit goods out of the country while also facilitating trade and travel. So if it's going to take very long to process your documentation, they will typically refer you to secondary to clear the line to continue processing passengers that are coming through. So just have your documentation with you. Know that when you're traveling as a student, your purpose is to travel as a student, and you need to meet all those requirements, 10 classes, do all those things. And you'll have a great experience. So I'm very excited for you. If you are traveling with a dog, this was new this last summer, and it is a Center for Disease Control regulation that we enforce at the border. You need to have some paperwork in order. And if you do plan to travel with your dog, I would definitely schedule an appointment with your vet to get this information done before you travel. So you need to have a vaccine, rabies vaccine, and make sure that they're microchipped as well. There's some paperwork that you'll need, and the dog needs to be not a puppy, at least 6 months old. So make sure you do that before you travel, and check the CDC website as well. All right, so when you're crossing by car, if you plan on importing a car, there'll be different requirements for that. You can certainly, buy or rent a car if you're in the United States too. And I see a lot of you are going to be in different places, and some places have really great mass transit in the U.S. and some places don't. So whether you need a car is really going to depend on which city that you're in. And then when you go into look at the prohibited items, anything that is organic, anything that, was living, wood, firewood, anything like that, you want to make sure to check that before you bring those items in. So if you have a favorite food, if it's something that's homemade, I would advise you not to bring that. If any, firewood you can't bring if you're planning on camping out on the way. There are just some rules, and you want to make sure that you check all of that. The agriculture violations are also very important in addition to your paperwork. So just make sure that you're complying with all the things, and everything is listed. You have a chance to search if you have a specific question, but there's really good outlines on these websites that are listed here. There's a great help center as well. You can post questions. You can submit a question. I mentioned that border wait time as well. And then this study in the States, DHS.gov, you can go in and put your status and what kind of school you'll be attending, and it will give you a guide. And I'm very much a fan of kind of a checklist approach. So it basically will print out a 6-7 page form. Will tell you all the things really that Jenica's already covered about bringing your CVIS, what to do when you arrive at a port of entry, all those requirements printed out in a really easy guide to follow. So suggest you also go to that studyinthestates.dhs.gov. So when you go in, this is the website I mentioned with the help.dhs.gov, help.cbp.gov. The initial website that you'll see, I don't know if you can read it, but it says submit a complaint, submit a question, ask a question. There is also a chat bot that's new. And what I know about chat bots is that all of the questions submitted have to be word for word. And this is new just in the last few weeks. So I would make sure if you're not getting an answer from this to go in, search for the question, or there's a chance to submit a question with your email address and have someone get back to you as well. So chatbots can be a little tricky. But on this help.cbp.gov, this is the same website. If you click on that top portion that says most of your answers will be here, and Janica's highlighted it with this arrow, there's a drop-down list, and there's so much good information here. I mean, hundreds of questions that have been asked and answered. That bottom one, know before you visit, click on that. And then it will give you lots of information in this location. Know before you visit, list of prohibited items, all those things. So for example, here's a list. There's certain alcoholic beverages you can't bring across, tableware, cultural artifacts, things like that. There's a huge long drop-down list with this. All right, so questions.
Thank you so much for all of those resources, Sarah. And so we invite you to use the Q&A area to submit your questions for this portion. We'll take about 10 minutes of Sarah's time, or depending on how many questions you receive. The first question coming through is one that I was expecting to receive. Does anything change with the border crossing if you have a Nexus card? Should I use the Nexus lane when crossing as a student?
So it's not a 100% yes or no. You can use it. You would need to adjust your status in your trusted traveler profile, but if you want to talk with someone, go through the process, have them adjusted in person, that's completely fine. So probably easiest to speak to an officer there, but you know, it's not a horrible tragedy if you do use a Nexus line. You just need to go in and update your traveler profile.
What kind of documentation is considered proof of funds? On the website, it says, to have your I-20, your passport, proof of CVIS, and proof of funds. So what is the border guard looking for in that regard?
Just the normal things that you would show that you have enough money to support yourself. So if you are bringing in cash, if it's over $10,000, you would need to declare that and fill out some financial forms, FinCEN forms. But you just need to show that you're going to be able to support yourself in whatever city you're living in.
So the university requires your proof of funds. So I do recommend just make a copy of the paperwork that you showed the university and go ahead and tuck that in your important documents folder. And that should do the trick since that was accepted by the university as well. All right, next question. What is the process for bringing my car with me to school? What are the import fees like? What is it? Is it recommended to try to bring a car to school for a 4-year degree?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the length of time that you're in. So if you are bringing a car, you want to make sure it has a Department of Transportation and an EPA sticker on it showing that it is roadworthy in the United States. And those stickers are typically under the hood or along the interior of the car door. So if you don't have those, it can certainly be an issue. There are some specific forms that you'll need. And if it's for a year, then it's basically it's being temporarily imported.
And I believe we also put on one of the slides, if you are thinking of driving across, you can call the border ahead of time to double check the things that you'll need at that border crossing.
Yes, but on that help.cbp.gov, all of that's spelled out. So if you look up importing a car, all of the instructions are right there.
Excellent. And when you arrive on campus, so here's the most important thing. When you're in the United States, you can't drive around a car. Like if you live in a state, you can't drive around without a license plate and a driver's license in that state. And you can't get a driver's license in that state if your car isn't imported. And so you could run into some serious issues if you drive a car without a local license plate for an extended period of time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And all of the motor vehicle associations in the states handle it in a slightly different way. So it's really going to be specific to the state that you'll be in.
Yes, it means you get to interact with the DMV, which is a joy, a truly American experience.
That's sarcasm right there.
All right. We've had a couple people asking about how much time they should plan for crossing the border. And one person specifies the airport, but I think we could talk about both land and air.
Right. Like I mentioned with the land, if you're going to cross in a specific area and you know where you're crossing, make sure to check that location, make sure the hours, are going to be open when you're planning on crossing through. You may want to go in some off-peak times. But you can always check that the border wait times. There's an app and you just look up the place you're going. And if there's a long, delay for something, it can be anything. It could be a car accident. It could be, a delay with some commercial vehicle or a car that's broken down that might be blocking that. Then you can just easily go to one of the other ports to the right or the left and cross that way. If you're doing by air and you're flying through a pre-clearance location, you will actually be processed before you leave Canada. If you are not flying out of one of those 8, and I can read them again, then you just want to make sure to build in enough time on your layover so that you're not stressed, you're not rushed. If your flight gets in late and then you got to stand in line to talk to a CBP officer, that can take some time. So just, don't put yourself under any unnecessary time constraints. So build in a long layover if you're flying from one of these airports that do not have pre-clearance. So the ones that do, again, and this is where you would interact with the CBP officer before leaving Canada, that's Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Halifax.
Excellent. And as a follow-up, someone asked how long will they be delayed in secondary? So I think more the question is, does a student get pulled into a secondary area necessarily just because they're entering as a student?
No, and a lot of it depends on the number of officers that you have working at that time, depends on the size of the port that you're crossing at or the airport that you're flying through. But like I said, part of our mission is to facilitate trade and travel. So if it's going to be any kind of an in-depth conversation to look at paperwork, or you're fumbling around not able to find the paperwork, they're going to send you to secondary as a time-saving measure so that people behind you can continue making their flights.
And what is issued to the student at that point? So they cross over, they have their I-20, they show that to you, the border guard. You give them, you're looking at their CVIS record, you hand that to them. Do you give them anything? Do you hand them or stamp an F1? What's the I-94 and how do they receive that?
Yeah, it'll be an electronic I-94.
And what is the I-94?
That's their form showing when they came in.
And the F1 status itself, do they get like a stamp in their passport? Is that, how does that work for them?
Are you saying that they have an F1?
The Canadians who are going with, they have their I-20 and it has the F1, it says F on the top. Are they issued anything additional? And so the answer is basically they're going to get the I-94 record and then that will be an electronic record that they receive.
Correct. But you don't need that F1.
And for that record, how do they receive it? Is it like something they look up online?
It'll be part of their profile. Yeah, it'll be part of their profile.
Excellent. Okay. Do you think driving with things like your household items, if you're moving in, is okay? Things like a mini fridge or a mattress, are these things okay to bring with you over the border?
You can certainly bring some items for your personal use.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just double check that prohibited items list and make sure you don't bring something on there. Okay.
And I'll caution you again on the agriculture products. So if you've got a bag of Doritos in your car and you're driving, that's one thing. If you have a bag of oranges, that's a no. So there are certain processed foods that would be in, containers, but if it's something that is homemade or another kind of an agriculture product, plants, don't bring that stuff. Just leave it all behind, because those are the things that can carry pests that can decimate, an entire forest or an orange grove or a complete industry.
And just a clarification question. When we mentioned that the I-94 would be in the profile, we mean specifically their CVIS profile that they've created. That's correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. And then how about when they return home for Christmas or holidays and they want to then, of course, go back into the United States? What should they have with them on an additional border crossing?
Yes. Keep those documents with you. Again, I would have them organized. I would have them in handout form, paper form, just to easily be able to show at the border crossing. You don't want to be fumbling around trying to find things and have your phone die or your iPad die. Just, have them easily printed off, everything there. And if you're not sure, it's okay. Bring it anyway.
And this happens often. Someone asks, they live near the border. They plan to fly, but they live in driving distance to the border. Does it make sense to visit and drive over kind of before flying in order to cross and then essentially make a U-turn and go back home? Is this advisable? Is that okay to do? Will that help reduce hurdles when they eventually go on and fly to the US?
No, I would say when you cross in, be ready to go on to the school. Like, I think minimizing kind of any confusion or back and forth is probably the best advice.
Are there any pros or cons to driving across the border rather than flying to the destination? Is one better than the other?
I think it probably depends on whether you're bringing your car or not.
How many things you want to bring. If you're the person who wants to bring a mattress, for example.
But we do have stores. There are IKEAs and other things. You'll be able to get what you need. I probably wouldn't deal with the hassle of trying to bring any large furniture.
Excellent. And so there's a lot of people asking about proof of finances and proof of funds and all of that. And so we just need to reiterate that in order to get an I-20 from the university itself, you do need to show proof of funds to the university. So work with your DSO on what those documentations are in order to prove your funds. Whatever documents you use to prove your funds to the DSO, just make copies of them. Put them in your important documents folder. That way, in case the border guard is asking you, you already have all that information that was approved by the university as well. So a lot of people asking about that. So for example, if you have a scholarship, your scholarship is part of your proof of funds because the scholarship's helping to pay for your funds to go to school. I think we have time for potentially one more question. Do I need to renew my I-20 annually or my CVIS record annually? Is that one that you're familiar with?
I'm not.
Okay. I'll go ahead and take that. Everything should be good for the duration of what's listed on your paperwork. So you don't need to renew anything as long as you're within the dates of your program and that your paperwork will be valid. And of course, that's the border guards are looking for when you're traveling, that you're within the duration of your study period. Okay. Oh, we'll take this last question. Is there anything extra needed if you're a Canadian entering from a different country besides Canada?
Anything extra?
Yep.
Yeah,
Anything different they should expect or
I think my first question would be which country, but I think as long as you have your Canadian documents and all the other things we've talked about, I wouldn't see an issue.
excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I know we have upwards of 60 questions in the Q&A currently. So unfortunately, we won't get to every single one of them, but I think we hit on the major ones. Again, everyone, thank you for your questions. And thank you, Sarah, for the generosity of sharing your knowledge and your time.
Yes, enjoy. You'll have a wonderful experience.
Fabulous. So now I'd like to welcome my colleague, Rachel, to jump on. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, hello everyone.
Rachel's going to now walk you through some tips once you've crossed the border and you're arriving on campus.
Yes. So after successfully crossing the border, you will make your way to your new home. So here is what to expect when you first arrive on campus. The first thing to remember is you need to check in with the ISSSO, as this is the mandatory step for international students as part of the immigration compliance. And also Jenica explained this as well. You also need to bring your passport, your study permit, the visa, letter of acceptance, and other documents. And then you can move in and attend the orientation for your students, for international and first-year students. You will also need to set up your transportation, like the bus cards, the bike, and etc. Get the student ID. Also learning the accommodations if needed, and open a bank account and the cell phone plan. So there are normally two banking options for Canadian students studying in the US. The first one is Canadian bank with a US dollar account. And the second one is a US bank with the US bank account itself. So the benefits of having Canadian bank with US dollar account is that there's normally no transfer fees needed from Canadian dollars to US dollars. And it's available at major Canadian banks such as RBC and TD and etc. And if you decide to open a US bank account, there are normally some on-campus credit unions, and you will need to also sometimes bring your passport and to prove your, also to have a proof of your address. And when you are going to open a new account in the US, so here are the documents that you need, depending on the bank. And sometimes they will also ask for the social security number or tax ID number, but not all banks require these. And if you want to open a cell phone plan in the US, so if you can also have two options. First one is to have Canadian cell phone plans, because now there are more North American options. You can have just simply have an add-on option. You can just make phone calls in the US. And also you can have the SIM cards, like the campus SIMs, Mint, Mobile, and etc. And you can also sign a US contract. For example, you can have a 2-year contract, and sometimes they will also need your social security number or tax ID number. And preparing to be successful students. So academically, when you are studying in the university in the US, there will be large lecture halls, and there will be more students. There will be more discussions encouraged, and time management is always critical. So we will encourage you to have a planner, either digital or paper planner, just to keep track of all the deadlines and important times and exams and etc. And of course, prioritization is always the key. Be proactive if you need accommodations. So it's very different than studying at the high school. So studying in the university, especially when it's a large public university, you may not have, there could be limited interactions with the instructors or the TAs. So you can take advantage of the office hours or tutorials so that you can have more personalized help. And also reach out to the campus security, or if you have any culture shock, or if you have any trouble navigating the city or the campus. And there are some tips for success as well. So you can set some roommate ground rules when you be open to new experience, and start with a manageable course load, and use a planner, like I mentioned, for assignments or for add or drop deadlines, and plan your finances for the semester. And finally, for some campus health and safety issues, you can learn which healthcare providers are in your insurance network. You can always download their app and to familiarize yourself with the coverage that they have. And for the campus police, always save their number, just in case of there's an emergency, and to keep your ID with you. And if you feel overwhelmed, you need help with getting used to the new environment, you can always contact the residential assistant, which are usually the upper year students who live in the same residential building with you, and they can be they are normally the first point of contact. And lastly, student health services. They can help with the general medical care or mental health counseling, or sexual health services, and immunization prescription services, and etc. Okay, so to make the most of your time as a student, I'm sure many of you are interested in using your new skills in the workforce. And I'll hand it back to Janica for more information on work and training options.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome.
So you might recall that Sarah shared the study in the states.dhs.gov website, and that is in the handout section. It is one of my favorite reference points to learn more about training options in the US. So on that site, you can learn about CPT and OPT time. And we'll talk just a little more about it here. As an international student, you are allowed to work on campus up to 20 hours per week. You cannot work off campus freely, but there are mechanisms in order to get training experience or work experience potentially off campus. If you have an internship or co-op as part of your graduation requirements, then you can access curricular practical training. Curricular practical training can be used throughout the school year to meet those requirements, and that could be a paid work experience in your field. They use the word training because specifically the work that you are engaging in needs to be in your field. So if you're studying computer science, you'd be working in the computer science field, whereas, just a general part-time job, something like being a barista, I usually like to say, you can't work at the Starbucks across the street from campus, but you can work at the Starbucks on campus. So you can get a student job like that for your kind of general day-to-day expenses. Once you graduate, you can use what's called optional practical time, or OPT. This will be paid work in your field, full-time paid work. So no longer an internship, this would be a full-time job. And you have 12 months where you can use this time. And if you're in STEM fields, then there is a 24-month extension. So essentially you can work for up to 3 years if you're in science, technology, engineering, and math. If you are going to engage in work, you will work with your DSO. So remember, I have here work with your ISSO, so your International Student Service Office. So you work with your DSO in order to get what's called a tax ID number, which is essentially the Social Security number for international students or non-Americans. And so when you engage in paid work, you will receive this number, and that's something that you can then use that might help you with opening a bank account or potentially getting the cell phone plan, as mentioned previously. You will need an employment offer letter in order to file for a tax ID number. You cannot get this unless you are already engaging in or planning to engage in work. Go to the ssa.gov website to learn more about getting a Social Security number. And fun. This is our last slide. We like to end on taxes. Good times. So everyone needs to file taxes. Whether you make money in the US or not, you need to file taxes. Filing taxes does not mean necessarily paying taxes. If you are there as a student and you haven't made any income, then likely when you file taxes, it will just be in order to inform the government of that. However, if you have engaged in a job, or if you've received a scholarship that is considered income. So for example, if you're an athlete with a full scholarship, that includes your housing, your food, and potentially receiving checks to pay for other things like books, that is taxable income. So just be aware that when you file taxes, you may have taxes that you need to pay. Taxes are due April 15th annually in the United States. And please work with your ISSO again, if you have questions, and see what sort of resources they have. Oftentimes, universities have some accountants, maybe some who are learning to be accountants at your university, who help students with filing their taxes. And we have a few more minutes left here at the end where we can take some more questions. There were a lot of questions that came through, so I'm unlikely to be able to answer all of them, but I'll do my best to answer a few more questions. And these could be anything related to preparing to depart. There's been a lot of repeated questions, so I will do my best to get through these. As far as a recording goes, the session is being recorded and everyone will receive a recording afterwards. Additionally, we will put that on our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out. Am I able to work part-time while I'm in the United States? So as mentioned, you can work part-time on campus only. If you have another job, you cannot have another job off campus. And when you enter as a student, you're beholden to those restrictions. You cannot get an additional, students often ask me, can I get another visa that's a work visa? No, you can only go down on one visa class if you are, entering as a worker. That's a totally different scenario than as entering as a student. What exact documents can you take to a major bank? So I can go back to that slide on banking really quickly. So one thing to know about banks is they often do ask for a social security number or a tax ID number in order to open a bank account. So it is important to ask your fill in the blank, you know what it is, your DSO, talk to people at the International Student Services Office and see what banks locally are the best ones, especially if you don't have a social security or a tax ID number, if you're not working right away, but you want to open a bank account, find out where the best places for an international student are to open a bank account. So sometimes that might be the on-campus credit union, for example. That might be the only place where you can open an account right away. Or as Rachel mentioned, maybe using one of those Canadian banks that has a US dollar account that's located in the US, so you have a way to access money through that potential bank account as well. So you'll just have to determine based on your circumstance what's going to be the best thing for you. Can you work in the US during the summer? So in order to work in the US during the summer, you will need to work on campus, but you can work up to 40 hours a week. So oftentimes students who have a job, an on-campus job, they're able to up their hours to essentially full-time hours. And then if you have, again, one of those training mechanisms, CPT or OPT time, you can use that during the summer as well. So that needs to be training time that's related to your actual job. So you'll need to work with your International Student Services Office to see if you qualify for CPT or OPT time to be used towards a summer job experience. So for example, a good example would be lawyers. Lawyers always get summer internships, and that is part of their time in law school. So that would be something that should be part of CPT, curricular practical training, or as I mentioned, co-ops. So if you're part of a school that has engineering co-ops and a co-op session can be used during the summer, then that would be another mechanism to use that CPT time. So to be clear, for Americans, there's no restrictions. Like, we're talking specifically international students. If you have American citizenship, you can work wherever you'd like. You have a social security number, so you can open a bank account easily. Like, you have access to all those things because of your citizenship. So just note that these restrictions we're talking about are for non-Americans. On breaks, if you want to can you travel in the US, or do you have to return to Canada? You can stay in country. So the duration of your document, like your I-20, will have the duration of your program, which is the duration of the time that you can stay in the United States. So if you want to remain over the summer, you can do so. And then if you want to return to Canada, you can do so as well. Just make sure, as previously mentioned, when you come back into the US, you have all of your documents with you at all times. And regardless of where you go, you could travel to another country during summer, but when you return to the US, make sure you have all of your documents with you. Does OPT apply to graduate students as well? Yes, OPT applies to every time you graduate. So if there's anyone here who's studying in community college to get an associate's degree, after your 2 years, you can take a year of training, get your OPT time. You can then go on and get your bachelor's degree, study for another 2 years, get your bachelor's degree, do another OPT. You could go on and get a graduate degree for 1 or 2 years, however long your graduate degree is, get another OPT. So some students do take a lot of really good advantage of that opportunity to get work experience. Every time you graduate, you get another OPT period. And again, it depends on your degree. I can't say that across the board. There are some short-term degrees where you don't have OPT, particularly if you're on an M visa, like a vocational visa, you might not have an OPT period. But you mentioned graduate studies, so yes, you should have it. And where can you learn more about OPT? As I mentioned in the handout section, go to the studyinthestates.dhs.gov website. It's a great resource, and they have everything about OPT listed there. If you have any more questions, you can, of course, reach out to me and to Rachel, and we're happy to answer those for you. Okay. Let's see. There's a lot of repeated questions that we've already gone over. Let's see. I don't know, Rachel, if you saw anything that I haven't answered, that would be a good one. So just to clarify, there's been a few. If you have a US passport, is there anything else you have to show when moving to study? Typically, no. But you might want to, just like anyone, have an important documents folder. It's always good to have information about your school, where you're going to be living. But as an American citizen, there's not a stack of required documents that you need to show. Okay. Well, again, there are almost 100 questions, so we're not going to be able to get to all of them. I do want to take this time, this moment, to one more time thank our guests. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Sarah, for being with us. Thank you, Rachel, my fellow Education USA advisor. Please, everyone, stay in touch. Oh, this is going to be my last thing I do. Follow us on Instagram. We like to spotlight students, and I know that many of you receive my email asking if you'd like to be spotlighted. That if you didn't send it in time to be in the session today, that's fine. We'll take your picture and we'll throw you on our Instagram. The reason that this is a great thing to do is other students who are thinking about studying in the US will see that you've been successful to make that goal happen for yourself. And you serve as inspiration for those students. We want on our channel to be there to be real faces of real students. And I don't know if you noticed throughout this session, but all the students featured throughout this entire session are ones that have worked with Education USA and who have now gone down to the United States. And hopefully you've noticed that. And hopefully, you know, if anybody isn't going this fall and is planning to go in the future, hopefully that provides inspiration to see all the Canadians who have made this trip before you. All right, with that, we're going to let you go for this evening. Thank you everyone for joining us, and best of luck to you on your journey down to the US. Have a good night.